In this video, I'll walk through creating an HTTP handler with VisualStudio.net. First thing I'm going to do is create a new project, and I'll just create a new class library. Just give it a name. We'll call it Bogus Handler. It's not, our HTTP handler is not going to do anything, so that sounds appropriate. Now I'm just going to clear some of this out of the way, and we'll just start from scratch. Let me move this window down and enlarge it a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. What I'm going to need to do is add a reference to the system.web assembly. So we'll just right-click on References, select Add Reference, and scroll down here to system.web.dll, select and OK. And I need to add some using statements. So of course we'll use system. We'll use system.web, that's what we just added. And I need to create a new class, a public class. Let's call it MyHandler. And to implement an HTTP handler, you need to inherit from, or rather implement the interface HTTP handler. I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. Now I found the easiest way to implement an interface is to go to the class view, and then you can just sort of expand your project, open up your classes here, and if you right-click on the interface that you want to implement, you can select Add and then Implement Interface. And it sticks a little boilerplate code for you. Saves you a little bit of typing, especially for interfaces that have a lot of public classes or rather methods. See that this interface is pretty simple in that we have one void method and then of course one Boolean method. We can leave this Boolean is reusable method just as it is. It's simply going to return true. Now the is reusable method, it's basically telling IIS and the ASP.NET runtime that when you're through creating an instance of me, don't throw me away. Just keep using me for other requests that come in. If you set this to false, then it's going to have to spin up a new object instance every time another request comes in. So we'll just leave it like this. Now the next thing that we need to talk about, and really the only work that needs to be done in order to implement this, is to put some code in the process request method. Let me move these windows out of the way so we can see a little bit more. You'll see that this method just takes one parameter. It's a reference to an HTTP context object, and all that does is just sort of wrap up all the information you need to handle any individual request. So what we can do is capture a request and then respond to it any way we want. This is actually the way the ASP.NET engine itself works. It captures requests for pages with the extension ASPX, and then of course it parses the whole file and does all that stuff. All we're going to do is simply take our reference to the HTTP context object and use the response property, and then write. So this is just like doing a response.write in ASP3. And we'll just write out something simple. Hello from our bogus handler. Before I build this, I want to change the output of this project when I build it. Come down here to Configuration Properties, and on this build, we'll see our output path by default goes to this debug directory. And I just want it to go to the bin directory. That's going to be important in a minute, so just tuck that away that you want the assembly to go into the bin directory. And then let's go ahead and Control-Shift-B and we'll build it. You see, build 1 succeeded. So let's save it. Now we need to move on to the configuration. Writing the code for an HTTP handler is really only 1/3 of the things that you need to do. We need to configure IIS, which I'll show you in a moment, and then we also need to create a web.config and actually configure our web application. So now I need to start up the IIS Management Console, which I've done here. Let me go ahead and expand this, our default website, and I'm just going to create a new virtual directory. So I'll right-click, select New Virtual Directory, and just follow the little wizard. Let's just call our application Bogus Handler. And I'm going to need to give it the path of where I actually put the assembly. And this is going to operate just like any ASP.NET application in that the directory that I specify in my request via my browser, I need to have my assembly in the bin directory of that. So I'll show you. We'll request a page for something that should reside in the bogus handler directory, and then we need to have a bin directory under that. So I'll just browse to the directory, LBS, and bogus handler. You see there's our bin directory, and there's by default it would have gone in the debug, but we changed the path so that it puts the assembly in the bin directory. I'll just select OK, and next, and we can just take the defaults here and finish. Now what we need to do is right-click and select Properties, and we have to click on the Configure button. What we're going to do here is tell IIS when a request comes in for our extension, and we'll just call it .bogus, just to follow the bogus theme. We're going to just map it to the ASP.NET DLL that handles all requests for ASP.NET applications. So what I think is the easiest thing to do is just take an existing ASP.NET extension like ASPX, and we'll click on Edit. And what we want is this path here. It goes all the way to the ASP.NET ISAPI DLL. And we'll just select the whole thing and copy it. I'm going to press Cancel. Now I want to click Add, and I'm going to just paste this back in. And I need to put the extension that I want to capture here, so we'll just call it .bogus. And we're going to go ahead and leave all verbs on. We could limit this to post and get. We probably should if that's, if we're not going to be debugging or anything like that. I'll just leave it on all verbs for now. And then this is important. I'm going to deselect this check that file exists because I'm not going to put any actual files in this directory. So it's going to be kind of interesting. We'll just type in the name of a file, and that file won't actually exist, but IIS is going to pick up that we requested something with this particular extension, .bogus, and it's going to hand it off to the .NET runtime. So let me just click OK here, and apply and OK. And I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. Now there's one last thing to do. I also need to tell ASP.NET what to do once it gets this request for this .bogus extension. So as I said earlier, the way we're going to do that is by adding a web.config file. So the easiest way to do that is right-click, add new item. We'll just find a text file here. We'll call it web.config. And I need to type in the configuration tags and system.web. And then inside here, HTTP handler, plural. And now we need to add. I'm going to say verb equal, and we'll give it a star, and that basically means react to everything, a get, a post, a debug. It's very similar to that checkbox when I said all options there instead of limit. So the next thing we need to do is tell it which type to use to react to. We're going to have to call this bogus handler dot. Let's see, what was the name of our class? Well, it's my handler, and actually it's just my handler. This bogus handler would be the name of the namespace, but I didn't specify a namespace, so we'll just call it my handler. It's the name of the class, and then comma, and you need to give it the name of the assembly. So again, our assembly name is going to be bogushandler.dll, but you'll notice you don't specify the .dll or the .exe if it were in an exe. You just tell it the simple name of the assembly. So then the last thing that we need to do is specify the path attribute, and that basically just tells it which extension that we want to map to. And we said we'd call this a star.bogus. So this is going to capture anything that comes through that ends in .bogus. Let me just save this. So now we're ready to test. So I'll just fire up Internet Explorer here. And we need to browse to the virtual directory I created. Go to localhost/bogus handler slash, let's make something up. This file does not exist. .bogus. And you see, here's the message that gets returned from this code here. So while this example doesn't really do anything meaningful, I think it does illustrate how easy it is to implement your own HTTP handler, and it also showed you how to configure both IIS and ASP.NET to handle any extension that you wanted to handle. Hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.